as you know, the classical forum for contemporary issues. I'm not going to give a long introduction. I'm just going to say that we welcome, polite and respectful discourse and inquiry on all subjects of contemporary interest. Tonight, we are co-sponsoring this talk with the Palestine Heritage Project, which sort of takes its start from the notion that there's people who want to call this land Palestine. People who want to call this land Palestine, which is one of the names that has been associated with this land. It was also called Canaan at one time, and it was called Israel at another time, and parts of it were called by different names. It doesn't really matter what name you use for a country, it's still the same place. So we think that whatever we call it, it should be of interest to people who care about this country to find out a little bit about the incredible things that have happened here, the incredible literary and cultural traditions that have stemmed from this amazing place. Two of the major world religions, Judaism and Christianity, originated here. And they've left an incredible literary tradition. We had one talk, I gave a talk on the Hebrew Bible. And tonight we have the privilege of hearing from Professor Moshe Pinchuk a talk on the Palestinian Talmud. It's a Talmud that even Jews don't study as often as they study the Babylonian Talmud. And yet Moshe and I have had a running debate about which one was first. I claim that the Palestinian Talmud was first, but we'll hear from Moshe about that. Please, it's really a privilege and an honor to have you here, Moshe. Please take the reins.
Okay, thanks, Gabi. I'm just going to acknowledge the presence of my father, who is also attending. That's the other Pinchuk that you see here. So thank you for attending. Thank you, Gabi, of course, and for everybody that's here. I'm just going to share my screen with you, and we will get to business. Okay, so the title of our talk tonight is The Strange Case of the Palestinian Talmud. And I was actually looking for a picture to somehow depict this strange case, or this contradiction of terms almost. The best I could come up with is this picture that you see in front of you, which I took downtown Jerusalem many years ago. And I thought that the dissonance there was pretty appropriate for tonight. You have this Greek bust saying Happy Hanukkah in Greek letters and in English/Hebrew words, which kind of, in essence, is what we're going to be talking about. Interesting, a few years after I took this picture, I wanted to get a better picture of it, and I went back to the same place, but by that time, somebody had already decided that it wasn't really a good picture, so they painted it off. But anyway, this is just as a way of beginning. I want to talk, or to begin talking about the origin of Palestinian or Palestine. Actually, the biblical word, and even pre-biblical, is Philistine. And this is referring to a nation or a conglomeration of nations who lived on the southern coast of Canaan, of Israel, in around the 12th to 13th century BC. It was really a pentapolis. There were like 5 different cities, Gaza, Ashkelon, and so on and so forth. And you can see it here in this map in that little red thing on the bottom. These people, or these peoples actually, were immigrants, and they were coming from basically the Aegean Sea, from Crete, and from all those islands, because of the collapse of the Mycenaean culture, which was just around this time in the 12th century BC. They immigrated to amongst other places. They were in Egypt as well. That's one of the ones we know about them. But one of the places they came was to the southern coasts of Israel. They were assimilated with those who were there. And these peoples are called Peleset or Philistines. So here you have one of the books that discusses this, The Philistines and Aegean Migration at the end of the Late Bronze Age by Asaf Yagor Landau. And let me say, there's very compelling evidence, as I mentioned before, that the Philistines originated from a Greek immigrant group or from Greek immigrant groups from the Aegean. So in a sense, these Philistines were Greek or early Greek. And there's been a lot of archaeological study of this Pentapolis, of these 5 different places in Israel. And all of it points to a very strong affinity between the culture of the Philistines in Israel and the ancient Mycenaean culture. As a matter of fact, this assumption enabled me to once write a comparison between the one-man combat between David and Goliath and the one-man combats or the single combats that you find all over the place in Homer and in other classic Greek literature. And the basics for this comparison is that essentially we're talking about the same culture, perhaps at different stages of development. Here again, you see it. As a matter of fact, there's a museum for Philistine culture in Ashdod, a very, very nice place. But they just happen to have a really nice little map that you see on your right, the various stages of the Philistine expansion. And as a matter of fact, the David and Goliath story was when the Philistines were attempting to further their presence inland. So they were going to come up through what you see here around Beit Shemesh and take that corridor up to Jerusalem or up to where Gabi lives. I wish I remember where I found this table, but this table kind of summarizes all the different Aegean nations that are mentioned. They're called the sea people, the people of the ocean, which are mentioned actually in Egyptian literature. And you see all these different names. And what, of course, catches our interest is Peleset, which we identify as the Philistines. So that's the story of the Philistines, which later on turned into the name Palestine for that area, and then later on turned into Palestinians for the people that live there. I'll just add another point, which I think is very interesting. In anticipation of this lecture tonight, I looked up the word Plishtim in the Septuagint. Well, I started out by looking up in the Hebrew Bible, and it appears almost 300 times. And then I started going through the Septuagint to see how they translate this word in the Bible. I didn't do all 300 of them. I went through the Pentateuch, which has, I think, maybe maybe this 13 refers to altogether the Pentateuch and Joshua. And every single time it is translated, as you see, as Philistim. One place is translated as Gerar. That's really the one of the cities of Elimelech there. But what I found extremely interesting is that from Judges onwards, and I'm saying again, I didn't do all 200 times, but I spent quite a lot of time looking at the translations, and every single one is allophilos. Allophilos really means of another tribe. And this is what's used in the Septuagint to denote the Philistines. And I was thinking to myself, what could explain this change from calling them Philistim, which is really, I think, a proper noun, to allophilos, which is kind of an adjective of another nation. If you wish, we can call them the invaders. And I think that it's really only in Judges that the Philistines became our enemies and became a danger to us. That's when they started trying to invade inland. So suddenly at that point, we realized that those people who are living down there south are not friendly at all, and they're invaders, and they're of another nation, and we have to be careful of them. This is my theory. You might ask me, well, why doesn't the actual Hebrew Bible change the name appropriately? I don't know. But in any event, this is an interesting phenomena. and this is, my al regel achat on 1 foot explanation for it. Just, of course, to be clear, these invaders, these immigrants really have nothing to do with the modern Palestinians, but they were apparently viewed as an invading species. Okay, so much for a brief introduction to the history of the word Palestine today. And I can just make 3 comments now. When I realized this, it was suddenly ironic and symbolic that today an enemy of modern Israel has a similar name and a similar geographical location of this ancient Israel's first enemy. The Philistines, I think, are probably our first enemy as a nation on a land. Of course, the Egyptians, if you want, were our enemies, but we were in their lands. But when we came to Israel, our first enemies after we conquered the land were actually these Philistines. That was one comment, one observation. I think by now you can begin to appreciate the title. I mean, what does it mean, a Palestinian Talmud? I mean, no Jew in his right mind would name a revered literary creation, the Talmud Yerushalmi, in honor of a bitter biblical enemy. So that's pretty strange that it is called the Palestinian Talmud. In fact, I don't remember seeing any Hebrew work, and I'll talk about this in a moment, using the word Palestinian Talmud in its title. And finally, okay, so I think by now it should be evident that Gabi's suggested title to this talk, The Strange Case of the Palestinian Talmud, is quite appropriate. Yes, so indeed the Palestinian Talmud is called so, and I tried to find the first occurrence. When did anybody ever call this Talmud the Palestinian Talmud? Because at least in the medieval and earlier, the Gaonic literature, which is deeply steeped in the Talmud Yerushalmi, they of course do not use the word Palestinian Talmud. And I think it first started in the 19th century, of course, only amongst academic scholars. And I'll just give you three examples that I was able to find. The earliest in 1883 is actually a manuscript. They published a manuscript of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is an even earlier book, corpus that was written, and the Talmud really is a commentary to that Mishnah. So they thought they found the original Mishnah, and they call it, as you see, the Mishnah on which the Palestinian Talmud rests. And on the left side is just a much earlier edition of this book. And it looks like it. And this is, I think, the first time that I find the name Palestinian Talmud. Another place I find it is in this grammar book, Grammar of the Palestinian Aramaic, or the Aramaic of the Talmud Yerushalmi. In a parenthetical remark, the grammar or the language, the Aramaic language, which is used in the Talmud Yerushalmi, is different. It's a different dialect than what we are normally used to in the Babylonian Talmud. So he has this book about the grammar of the Palestinian Aramaic, or the Jewish Palestinian Aramaic, and here again the word Palestine. Later, you have a commentary on the Palestinian Talmud by Louis Ginsberg. You might know the name. This is relatively, it's in the 20th century, and here it's very interesting. So the title page in English, as you see, says the Palestinian Talmud, but this entire book is actually written in Hebrew, and this is just the title page. And if you flip around the book and you look at the Hebrew title, you get something else. This is that very same book. If any of you are reading Hebrew, so you see it's Levi Ginsberg, and here it is Ba Yerushalmi, not Ba Palestini. So they don't dare use the name Palestinian when they write in Hebrew. I think this is very, very interesting and very blatant. Another example is a very well-known scholar, Saul Lieberman, and in a book which is really a collection of all his published studies in Hebrew, or most of them, again, the English the English page states studies in Palestinian Talmud, and of course the Hebrew has studies in the Torah of Eretz Yisrael, of Israel. So you see, nobody really dares call the Talmud, the Palestinian Talmud, certainly not in Hebrew. What is the name of this Talmud Yerushalmi in Hebrew? Here it's interesting. There seems to be some type of identity crisis or confusion, because here on the right side, you have, again, the front page of the standard printing of the Talmud Yerushalmi, and the printer here couldn't really make up his mind what to call it. So he says, I'm going to go to the left side now, just so you see bigger, Talmud Yerushalmi, that's the first line. And then he says, wait a minute, or maybe we should call it Talmud HaMa'arav, the Talmud of the West. Again, if we're all oriented in Babylon, that's where the center is, then Israel is to the west of us. So let's call them the Westerners. V'yesh korin lo, and actually there's even a third name, Talmud Eretz Yisrael. So this is interesting. They're not really sure what the proper name is. It's given different names for different reasons, but this is the name in Hebrew, or the variety of names in Hebrew that we find for our Talmud Yerushalmi. I'll just give you one final place concerning this. You have in front of you the first page of the very first printing of the Talmud Yerushalmi. This was in Venice, and it's in the printing house of Daniel Bamberg. And here again, look, the title he gives it is Talmud Yerushalmi, and in his little song over here, he's saying, oh, we're so happy that we finished printing our Talmud, namely the Babylonian Talmud, and now we're going to start printing the Talmuda de Bnei Ma'arava. So in the same breath, the title is Talmud Yerushalmi, but then he suddenly changes to Talmuda de Bnei Ma'arava, again echoing this confusion of what it really should be called. Okay, again, all this was really technical name calling, but let's get down to a deeper understanding of the Talmud. This is what I can offer you as a concise description of the Talmud Yerushalmi. And I'll read it. The Talmud is the commentary on the Mishnah. You remember the Mishnah is an earlier text written in Hebrew, produced in the Palestinian rabbinical academies during the 3rd and 4th centuries CE. However, the Talmud contains much more than Mishnah commentary. It's a whole world of stories and analysis and medicine and astronomy. It's really a collection of everything. It cites and discusses other Talmudic sources and includes legal decisions and discussions which are unrelated to the Mishnah, as well as a substantial amount of non-legal material. The Talmud is written in a combination of Hebrew and Galilean Aramaic. This is what Dalman was talking about. This is the Galilean Aramaic. This is the dialect of Aramaic, which was used in the Talmud Yerushalmi, as opposed to Babylonian Aramaic, which was used in the Talmud Bavli. I'll just make one comment, which is very true. The true Bible of the Jewish nation is not the Bible, but actually the Talmud Bavli. Sorry, I'm going off in the Talmud Yerushalmi for a moment, but that is really our true Bible. That is the ultimate source for any question or any thought that any Jewish rabbi or scholar or just believer might want. That is where he's going to go to. I mean, you know, the Bible also gave birth to Christianity and even to Islam. The Bible itself, it really can be pulled in many directions. So I always say that the Jewish Bible is really the Talmud Bavli. Now we're talking about the Talmud Yerushalmi, and just to be clear, in essence, this description I just gave you really fits the Babylonian Talmud just as well. This is a very, very general definition. And look, I can change a few words. Over here, I'll change it to Babylonian, and I'll change the dates a bit from 3rd to 6th centuries. And finally, I'll change the language to Babylonian. And here you have a concise description of the Talmud Bavli. And at this point, you might be asking yourself, well, what then is the difference between these two Talmuds? And I think I would suggest that there are two differences, two areas of differences. One, of course, is the Zitzim Laban. I mean, the Yerushalmi was created in a completely different geographical location in Israel, not in Babylon. And the conditions there were completely different. And this is what we're going to focus on as we go on. And its subsequent history also was very different. And I'll dwell on the subsequent history for a few moments, and then I will leave it alone. So first of all, when you have two centers vying for supremacy, you have the center in Israel, which is creating the Talmud Yerushalmi, and they want to be the leaders, the spiritual leaders of the Jewish nation throughout diaspora. But at this point, they're all over the place. And you have another center in Babylon, which is doing the same. Then, of course, there's going to be a competition. And for various reasons, which I won't get into now, the Talmud Yerushalmi was defeated, miserably defeated in its competition with the Babylonian center. And today, as you saw before, we always talk about our Yerushalmi, or our Talmud, or the Talmud, which means the Babylonian Talmud. And then there's that one. There's the other one, Alo Talmud, which is the Talmud Yerushalmi. And you even saw it's called by some the Western Talmud, which means that your point of reference is in Babylon, and Israel is west to Babylon, and therefore, okay, that's on the Western. We're the center, you're on the West. So they were defeated and relegated to the periphery of legal and intellectual discussion. And that's really why, up until this very day, the Talmud Yerushalmi is not the centerpiece, far from being that, on any Talmudic study. You can walk into various yeshivot, which are, I guess, rabbinical schools or academies, and you probably wouldn't see too many people actually studying the Yerushalmi. They're all deeply busy studying Talmud Bavli because that's what counts. And the Yerushalmi is just a kind of a curiosity for people to learn. And because it was relegated to the periphery, then, when you print books, you can print 1,000 of them. But when you have to pay dearly for a scribe to actually copy the book for you, you're only going to pay for the really important books. Once upon a time, Darwinism was working in the creation of books. It was the survival of the best books, and indeed, only the best of them were copied over and over again. Today, with the printing press, that's kind of not relevant anymore. And because there weren't very many copies being made, and nobody was really studying it, so when the copyist copied and made a mistake and missed a line or whatever, nobody was even around to correct him. So this faulty transmission went on. So today, when we open up our Talmud Yerushalmi, we have quite a challenge to try to clean up all these errors that accrued over the generations. That's my bread and butter throughout the week, but this really doesn't have anything to do with us tonight. What I want to talk about now, of course, is the Zitzim Laban, to talk about the Yerushalmi, where it was born. Okay, so let's just go back and do some history. So Alexander the Great conquered the East in the famous 332 BC. And that's really the advent or the entrance of the Greek or Hellenic culture into Israel. And this culture, of course, continues with the Roman and later Byzantine occupation in Israel. And I'll just make a point which I think is very interesting. All the important literature of the Jewish nation, which begins with the Mishnah and goes on to the Talmuds and everything after that, of course, is really all being created and written under this umbrella of very strong Hellenic culture and influence. And I think that's something important to realize and remember. This is not completely independent, a completely independent creation like the Bible, but we're heavily, under this cloud of Hellenic influence. In addition to that, in Israel, they suffered from oppression, certainly under the Roman times, and therefore a lack of autonomy. And this largely stilted the independent growth and development of the Talmud Yerushalmi. They weren't completely dependent. They were always, under being oppressed and checked by the Romans or the Byzantines. It's interesting. I was once at some lecture where the lecturer was making a very strong case. He said, listen, we're all back in Israel. We're an independent nation. It's about time that we go back and start, acting according to the Yerushalmi rather than to the Bavli. The Bavli is the Torah, is the knowledge of the diaspora, and now we're independent. We have to go back to the Yerushalmi. So I told him, if that's your line of reasoning, then your conclusion should be the opposite. If you're looking for a Talmud that was written by free and autonomous Jews, then you, of all people, should be following the Bavli. The Yerushalmi is not a creation of an independent and autonomous nation. He didn't like that too much, but that's just to make the point here of how oppressed the Jews were in the land of Israel. Meanwhile, in Babylon, more or less at this time, so first of all, they are under a different cloud, under Eastern culture, Persians, Zoroastrian, or what have you, and they also enjoyed autonomy to a very, very large degree. I mean, you learn the Talmud Bavli, and you see they decide the rates, they fix the bridges, they set the market. They're completely autonomous there. You never would have known that you're far away in Babylon. So that's the Zitz and Leben and the difference between them. So the Talmud Yerushalmi was written and created in Israel, and there's a very large correspondence, naturally, between the geography described in Talmud Yerushalmi and the geography of Israel. And up until this very day, when you walk through Israel, you are literally strolling down the pages of the Talmud. I mean, any city that you might find, any city or even small town that is mentioned in the Talmud Yerushalmi, you can actually go visit it today. Some of the more famous ones, are still cities today. I don't have to mention Tiberias, Caesarea, and so on and so forth. But you can easily find all these places as archaeological sites, and you're literally walking down the pages of the Talmud when in Israel. And if you're talking about indigenous, so this is it. You can see the Talmud on your street map. I'll just give you two examples. A couple of decades ago in Ramat HaGolan, that's up north, they found this not lintel, but actually a sign of a house, which reads in Hebrew, "This is the school of Rabbi Eliezer HaKapar." And people were super excited about this. Rabbi Eliezer HaKapar, we know him. He's a well-known name, not in the Talmud, but even earlier than the Talmud in the Mishnah. And to actually find his academy, the remnants of his academy is quite amazing. So that's if you're talking about embedded the Talmud is in the land. You can't get more indigenous in that sense than this, but actually you can. And this, I'm taking you southwards to a small town, Rehov, 4 kilometers south of Beit She'an. And there they discovered, you can't really see what it is here, but this square in the middle is a mosaic, but it's not a picture, it's a text. It's a lengthy text taken out of the Talmud Yerushalmi. This is like from the 5th or 7th century CE. And this was a very, very exciting discovery because this is really the earliest text of the Yerushalmi that we actually have. So here you have Rehov. And just to give you a picture, this is what the actual mosaic looks like. You see it's just all words and letters. We don't have to go into detail what it's talking about now. And just so you get an impression of how beautiful it is, this is just a close-up after somebody poured water on it. So it's very clear and very nice handwriting. And it's simply a quote from the Talmud Yerushalmi. So on the one hand, if we're talking about the two opposite parts here, so on the one hand, the Talmud Yerushalmi is indeed deeply embedded in the archaeological and geographical landscape of Israel. But on the other hand, Greek content and thought is very strongly present in the Talmud Yerushalmi. Of course, here we can't go through everything or barely through anything, but I'll try to give you hopefully two examples. At the same time that the land of Israel is strongly influenced by Greek culture, in Babylon, there is a similar Eastern culture influence, as I mentioned before. And I'd like to give you an example, which I once wrote about, in the world of medicine. And today, there indeed seems to be a general pattern emerging where the sages of the Western Yerushalmi are influenced by Hippocratic sources for their medicine understanding, and the sages of the Eastern Bavli show more signs of influence from Eastern medicinal sources as well. And I'll try to give you an example, which I think is quite striking. This is a quote from Hippocrates, Nature of Child. What he's talking about here is, how is a child born? When it comes time for a child to be born, how does it work? And what he describes here is what I would call an active fetus. The mother is completely passive, and it's the child who is fighting his way out. When a woman is about to give birth, it then comes to pass that the fetus, by moving and jumping with its arms and legs, ruptures some of the interior membranes, and he kind of like digs his way out of the fetus. And all this happens when he begins to realize that he's running out of food and running out of place. And there's a whole description here, which I won't read. And Hippocrates then goes on to say, this is exactly what happens when an egg hatches, when a chicken hatches from its egg, right? I mean, the egg, the peel there is completely passive, and it's the little chicken inside who literally starts fighting for his life. He's run out of food, and he starts pecking and trying to break the outer shell. At some point, maybe the mother there helps him out a bit, but in essence, the chicken trying to come out of the egg, over there, the fetus is fighting for its life and just breaking everything it can in order to get out. And Hippocrates believed that this is what happens when a human child is born. The same exact thing. It's the fetus who's active and fighting his way out. If you look in some Eastern writings, you get the impression that their things are much, much calmer. These are all talking about the child floating out of the mother's womb. Right? Just look at the little one. May he come out like a snake. May he slither out like a little snake, like one who has fallen off a wall. May he not be able to throw his cheek towards his back, and that would be a breech birth. And you have more of these. The boat is detained. The boat is the child at the quay of difficult narrows. The Magaru boat is held back. Whom should I send to merciful Marduk? May the boat be loosed from the quay of difficulty. Again, they're just describing the birth as if the fetus is completely passive, and he just has to slide out or come out. So this in itself is interesting. Two different theories of how a child is born, the Western and the Eastern. But look what happens in the Talmudim. Okay, so on the top we have a Mishnah, which is talking about a woman who is about to give birth, but she's experiencing, I guess, life-threatening, hardships, and the baby is not being born, and the mother is in danger, and she's in a life-threatening situation. So Jewish law decrees one cuts up the child in her womb and brings it forth limb by limb. I mean, this is a nice way of saying that you kill the child, or the fetus, because her life comes before that of the fetus. But if the greater part of the fetus, or in other versions, it's the head, is emerged, one may not touch it, because at this point that the fetus is also considered a life, and one may not set aside one person's life for that of another. That's the Mishnah. The Talmuds both describe the same question. I'll start with the Yerushalmi. May one save the life of an adult with the life of a minor? And Rav Yirmiyah answers, he says, of course, this is the Mishnah we just read. If the greater part has emerged, one may not touch it, but if not, then yes. And so this is his proof text that, well, if the child has already been born, then of course you cannot do this. But if the child has not been born, you may do so. And Rav Yosef Barbun, in the bottom part, disagrees. And he says, can you compare saving the life of an adult with the life of a minor to this story in the Mishnah? The case of the Mishnah is different, for you do not know who is chasing who, or maybe I should translate better, who is endangering who. You have the mother, you have the child, and they're at a war at each other. The mother is holding on for dear life, and all her innards are connected, and the fetus is trying to fight his way out. So who's attacking first? Who's chasing who? It's an equal war going on here. The Bavli says a bit different. The Bavli begins with the same question: a minor pursuing another person. The pursued party may be saved with the pursuer's life. And Rav Chisda now raises an objection. He says, what are you talking about? In our Mishnah, we see that once the head is emerged, he may not be harmed because it's a human against the human, and you can't discard one life for another. And again, the comparison to the Mishnah is rejected, but the reason is different. That case is different since she is being pursued by heaven, not by the fetus. So I ask you to consider these two different reasons, which I put here in red. And I think that the Talmud Yerushalmi's reason, you do not know who is chasing who, is really based on the understanding that the fetus is active. He's fighting his way out of his mother's womb. He's endangering her. And by the same token, she is locking him in. She's not allowing him to come out. All her muscles and everything are all tight around him and stopping him. The Talmud Bavli, the Eastern, does not understand childbirth that way. The child is completely passive, and he's trying to slither out like a snake. And if there are any difficulties here, it is at no fault of the child. The child is a completely passive being here, and it's really heaven that is pursuing her, not the fetus. So what do you want from the fetus? So I strongly feel that these two different legal explanations really express two different understandings of how a child is born, the Western as opposed to the Eastern. So I think this is a very nice example of these two different influences that we have. Okay, this is concerning the medicine. Maybe I'll try to finish off with an example, this time just language. In the Yerushalmi, you find many, many Greek loanwords, more numerous in relation to the number of Greek loanwords you find in the Bavli. Over there, of course, you have Persian and Arabic loanwords. So here's a short story. A person entrusted his assets to Rabbi Ba, son of Memel, saying, "If my sons are useful children after I die, give them half of my assets and keep half." His sons came and took half, so I guess they were useful children. After a while, these children said, "Wait a minute, half is great, but everything is even better." So they appealed his decision, to which he replied, "Listen, your father told me to give you half on condition that you are useful children. But now your appeal has shown me that you are not useful children, but you are kakopedifti. And you know what? Now you have to return the first half that I gave to you." So I think it's pretty obvious that this word kakopedifti is some kind of Greek word. And the question is, what word is this? So here we don't have to go far. We have Saul Lieberman that we mentioned before. And he says, yeah, kakopedifti means an uneducated and uncivilized person. Okay. Then Lieberman goes on to say, but I did not find this word in any of the dictionaries. You look through LSJ, whatever, you won't find kakopedophtoi or anything like it. And as a matter of fact, the real or the proper term for an uneducated or uncivilized person in Greek is padeitoi, right? The is the negative. So what is this kakopedophtoi? So I thought Lieberman was going to reject this word because there's an alternate version which doesn't read kakopedifti, but it reads kakaprigmainim, kakopragmones, which is a real word, and it means you are an evil doing person. Right? Pragma is work, kakopragmones, and that's a nice mirror image of useful people. And he's very happy with this word. And I thought, he's probably going to reject this version of kakopediftoi, end of story. But he doesn't. And I was wondering why he doesn't reject it until actually, this is somebody that Ricardo Gantz, my Greek teacher. He said, sometimes maybe they just would make up words. If you weren't an expert in Greek and you wanted to say something, then you would build your own Greek word, even though perhaps it did not have a real parallel in the LSJ. They were not experts in the Greek language, but they knew how to play with words. So if this is true, then this is interesting. So you have this Rabbi Babar Memel in Israel, who is, of course, speaks Greek, and I guess he's even brave enough or knowledgeable enough to be able to construct Greek words, even though they're not, accepted and real words. So I thought this was a nice example, of the fact that this knowledge was at their fingertips. He knows the words, and he even knows to fling it at these children or at these inheritors. So obviously, both of the sides knew Greek, and apparently he's even able to make up and construct Greek words. So if I can summarize what we did tonight. So at the beginning, we spoke about the source of today's word Palestine, which is from Philistine, and invading people of the Mycenaean origin living in the southern coast of Israel. I'm saying again, as we saw, the origin of this word is even pre-Bible. You find it in all these Egyptian writings, if you can call them writings, about these Pelesets who were invading them from the sea. The Palestinian Talmud is a term first used in the 19th century by academic scholars. This term simply does not exist, I think, in Hebrew works, and we understand very well why. The indigenous terms for the Talmud is Talmud of the West, Talmud Yerushalmi, Talmud of Israel, not Palestinian Talmud. The Talmud Yerushalmi is unique relative to the Talmud Bavli in two areas, the Sitzin Laban and the subsequent history. And regarding the Zitzin, excuse me, so I try to point out two things. First of all, the geography. I mean, the Talmud Yerushalmi is happening in Israel. The stories there are in Israel. Other things also are all in Israel. And today you walk around Israel and you can literally, you're walking down the Talmud lanes. And on the other hand, as deeply connected as the Talmud Yerushalmi is to the land of Israel, when you look at the content, you see that there's a tremendous amount of Greek knowledge, not only of the words, but of their philosophy, of their science, which I tried to demonstrate in medicine, and then again, just in their vocabulary. So that is it for tonight. Thank you very much.
So, first, let me thank you for this really masterful account of the Palestinian Talmud, and you really did exactly what I wrote on the question. Is it Hellenic or is it indigenous? And you really did give us a great view, a glimpse of that. So let me turn this over to Sophia, who will moderate questions that any people may have to ask to Professor Pinchuk.
So Ed has his hand up. I don't have any questions in the Google sheet, but
anyway, let me just ask this question. Many times in the Talmud Bavli, there's a question that comes up, and they send somebody over to the West to find out the answer. So it looks like they're held in great respect, and it's I find it. And there are a couple of people who are going back and forth between Jerusalem and Babylonia, and conveying questions and answers. And I just find it puzzling that you're right. It's the Babylonian Talmud that's the major work, and the Jerusalem Talmud, which is based on all of these very well respected scholars, is just kind of fallen by the wayside, and I just don't understand why.
Well, it's a lot of politics and a lot of money and economics, whatever. So first of all, let me just point out. I mean, you asked a very good question. If you start looking through the Bavli, the most prominent figures there, Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, are bona fide Israeli. Scholars, right? Can't get more Israeli than them. So what's going on? So of course there was a lot of communication between both sides. As a matter of fact, Professor Zussman once pointed out, instead of being surprised at the differences between the Talmuds, you should be surprised at how much they are similar one to another. We're talking about vast distances in those days for communications to go through. What should I say? Competition and animosity was kind of a gradient, which means it started out at low keyed, slowly but surely as economic pressures grew, the competition between them grew as well. So in the Bavli and Yerushalmi itself, you won't find too much, competition. If you look for it, you'll find it very, in between the lines. But as you go on to, for example, the Gaonic literature, we're talking about, let's say, the 8th and 9th century, you find them using, if I can say, pretty strong invective against the Talmud Yerushalmi. Don't go to them. They don't know what they're talking about. They've been persecuted. They lost all their knowledge. Come to us, ask us questions, the Bavli, and we'll take care of you. And the subtext there is, when you come to us to ask us questions, of course you pay for these questions. So it's basically, to make your subscription by us rather than in that magazine, because we can use the money. I mean, there are a whole lot of things, but yeah, the animosity or the competition between them grew slowly but surely, and it was the Gaonim at the end who kind of forced the points and completely considerably wiped out the Yerushalmi.
Is that also because the the Bavli, continued later. It had a longer period of composition, and the Yerushalmi had sort of we always go by the later sources. So since the Bavli had already seen the earlier material and added to it and refined it, so that would be the final authority.
That's what a lot of rabbinic scholars say. We, the academics, are not so sure that they actually saw everything in the Yerushalmi. I mean, there was a lot of going back and forth between the centers, but they did not necessarily have a Talmud Yerushalmi on their bookshelf in Babylon. The question, of course, is why did the Bavli last longer than the Yerushalmi? That in itself is an interesting question. But that's already the subsequent history. That's not as it's in Laban, but yeah, definitely.
So I just had two quick questions. One is, I don't know that much about how Jewish communities at the time the Jerusalem Talmud would have been written were interacting with the Greek-speaking communities around them. So I was wondering first if you have any theories about how they acquired their knowledge of Greek culture, if it was just kind of just by osmosis, by happening to live there, but at least it suggests they weren't fully ghettoized. So I'm just curious if we know something about the social context out of which the Jerusalem, and I just had one other quick question. My other quick question is the term Palestine comes up, I believe, in Herodotus, but that predates Alexander the Great, and when, from what I understand, most scholars think extensive Hellenic Jewish contact would have occurred. So does anyone have any theories about how he got the name? Was it through the Egyptians, or do some people think there may have been earlier contacts between the Greeks and the Jews? So those are my two quick questions.
Okay, I'll start with the easier one, which is the first, at least for me. I did not mention this, but different what should I say, rabbis in the Yerushalmi exhibit different levels of knowledge of Greek. I mean, you find Rabbi Akiva getting translations by Aquila, but he says, "What's going on here? Please translate this back to Hebrew." So he wasn't well versed. You have Rabbi Avahu, who lived in Caesarea, which was basically the hub of Greek, Greek everything. Shilton. My words are failing me. Not Greek, actually, the Roman. I'm sorry, I forgot the words. Gabi, help me out. Shilton, Inhala.
The Roman government.
The government, thank you. Anyway, so everything that was happening in Caesarea. Rabbi Avau lives in Caesarea, so he obviously knows a lot of Greek. He has the need to go and meet with them and to handle with them about taxes, about various verdicts that were given. So he knows Greek very well, but he's living in the metropolis. The other rabbis have varying levels of knowledge in Greek because of the amount of interaction they have with the Greek. But altogether, there is an amount of osmosis. I mean, you go to market and you want to buy some eggs, you're going to have to talk in Greek coin or in Roman coin. So, it happens more and less, depending on what you are. But nobody sat and had classes in Greek or not Latin for that, I imagine. The second question, I don't know does Herodotus really mention Palestine? We were just talking about it yesterday. He mentioned Syria, and it's really very surprising that Herodotus does not mention the Jews. He doesn't say Judeans or anything about them. So me and Gabi actually yesterday were just talking about this. I wanted to say, well, that's because the Jews weren't that important. The Jews always think that the world revolves about them. And usually that's true. But I don't know, maybe Herodotus, was there. He knew about these Jews, but they weren't even worthy of mention because they didn't figure in anything. So that's a conundrum. Why Herodotus doesn't really mention the Jews? Gabi says, and this is what Menachem Stern also says, that when he does mention the Syrians that were circumcised, that's the Jews. But I don't know. I don't know what he thought about that. And I don't know about Palestine either. You're here.
We have a question from Deborah in the chats. The question, did the Rome Press in Vilna publish the Yerushalmi as well as the Bavli?
Yes, they did. They did the standard version, actually, that page with the identity crisis, what to call it, is from the Rome edition. Yes, they printed both. The Venice edition, they also printed both. And of course, they printed the Bavli first, and only 2-3 years later did they print the Yerushalmi. So yeah, they printed both.
Is there a preference or prejudice in terms of viewing older or newer sources as more authoritative or authentic or otherwise valuable? I can imagine it running either way.
Let me just soak up the question.
Of course.
Okay, so I mean, certainly in the academic world, if I'm told every year you have to put on your syllabus, only books from the last 10 years, and if they're too old, then forget about it. Which is nice because that means that we're progressing, and new stuff overrides and updates the old stuff. But in the world of halacha, of course, if you find a statement by somebody from the Tanaim, the Tanaic strata, which is the Mishnah, then that has by far more authority over a later source. You can't have Maimonides arguing with Rabbi Akiva for that reason. So any subsequent generation, by definition, is lesser in authority than previous generations. And of course, their way to get out of it is say, "Oh, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just explaining what you're saying," which is fair enough. But yes, the earlier you are, the more authoritative you are concerning these ancient things. A friend of mine, Professor Faor, once quoted one of the chief justices in America, and he said, "Of course, we're bound by the Constitution, but we say what the Constitution means." So that's more or less what I'm saying. So you can't argue with the earlier sources, but you're free to interpret them.
Thank you. There's one more question on the sheet. Would you mind, do you want to read it yourself or should I read it?
Would you mind speaking, should I read it out loud? I'll read it out loud. Would you mind speaking a bit about the stakes of the Greeks' influence? I don't know what does that mean, the stakes of the Greek influence? I appreciate the scholarship and wanting to know so for its own sake, but are there political narratives being onto this? Who's and how? Okay, I think I understand the second half. This is going to take some time to organize it, but for sure, I mean, the Talmud, at least the Talmud Bavli, actually has a whole discussion: is one allowed to teach his children Greek? It's not clear when he makes. One second. I just lost my line of thought. Gabriel, you take away that joke.
You didn't say it.
You confused me. Yeah, so there's a question whether you're allowed to teach your children Greek knowledge. And they don't seem to be against it per se. They just say, there's more important things to learn, which is Torah. So if you can find a time which is neither day nor night, and then the command of learning Torah does not exist, well, learn away. Learn as much Greek as you want to at that time. Not in the same breath, but in another place, they say, girls aren't commanded, women are not commanded to learn Torah, and their learning Greek is like a tiara on their head. It's jewelry for them to have knowledge, which is a very nice statement. Here again, I can't at my fingertips start quoting things, but there is, I wouldn't say ambivalent, but there are various opinions what our approach should be to Greek knowledge. But all in all, I mean, this can't be denied. No matter what you think about it, at the end of the day, they knew, and they knew a lot of Greek culture, Greek language, Greek philosophy. As you know, I tried a very tiny bit to demonstrate.
A question about the kakobaitutoi, this Greek word that doesn't appear in the dictionary. So it could be, as you say, that they invented it, but let's not take the dictionary as, Torah from Sinai. It could be that it isn't attested elsewhere, and that really we should use the Talmud as a good source for reconstructing some Greek words that we don't otherwise know. After all, the Greek world was so broad, and there was lots of stuff going on here. Just a similar comment. We don't know. The Greeks didn't mark the letter He, the letter H, in the middle of a word. And we're never sure if they pronounced it or not because they didn't mark it. But we know that in Israel they did, because we have a word Sanhedrin, which has the H in the middle of the word. So there may be things that we can learn about Greek from these Israeli sources.
Okay, so interesting. I mean, we spoke a moment ago about the authority of earlier sources. So I'm going one better. This isn't Torah Sinai. This is Torah Sol Lieberman. He's the one. He's the one who says that he did not find this word, and he thinks that it's an invented word. I looked it up in Sokolov, is the Aramaic dictionary. He brings this word, and he just makes the comment that Lieberman says that this word is not attested. So he's a little bit more, gentle about it. He doesn't say it doesn't exist. It's just that it's not attested in the Greek that we know.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only thing is that over here, Lieberman was offering you the real word, so to speak, apodoi. So, maybe that further convinces you this one. But okay, I'm your student in anything to do with Greek, so you get the final call.
I'm just suggesting. The other point I wanted to make, which is that you simplified. You gave us a presentation of Talmud that we could understand. Let me put it that way. You did not take us into the very complex legal disagreements in the Talmud, because obviously this would be much too hard for us beginners on this. And as you know, there's people who study it for their whole life, and they're constantly trying to understand different ways. So I just wanted to emphasize that phenomenon. I find that when I'm back from Aristotle and reading a section of Talmud, and I usually read the Bavli, of course, it's so much more challenging. And I find it just the insights and the arguments are just so brilliant. I wonder whether this room, and I think maybe Saul Lieberman might be a little bit on my side on this, of seeing a certain just joy of arguing, or joy of finding crazy proofs for things in the place you'd least expect it. Because sometimes people read the Talmud and they think it's ridiculous. How can they seriously make this argument? But actually, I think there's another way to look at it, which is that it's just sheer intellectual joy of discovery. And that's what I think might explain why people can spend 20, 30, 40 years reading it, even if it's a long book. But it still wouldn't take that long to read it if it didn't have this extra dimension to it.
I totally agree. And if you remember, this is what happened at Pesach. These rabbis were in Bnei Brak, and they were deeply engrossed in studying the laws of Pesach, and they forgot themselves. And suddenly their students came and they said, "Guys, it's morning. Got to do something." Might be that. The reason, or one of the reasons I didn't go into this, because in this area of intellectual gymnastics, at least as far as I'm able to perceive, the difference between the two Talmuds is not that pronounced. They're all doing the same thing. So that would not really be a good area to demonstrate, differences between the Talmuds. The one sugya that I did bring, talking about the childbirth, was because there you saw their understanding of childbirth coming into play. But just an ordinary intellectual sugya would be much the same in both Talmuds.
Right. Okay.
But the joy is there, that's for sure. Yeah. Well, I can say that it was very enjoyable for me, especially the questions part, which was a little bit challenging. And thank you to everybody.
Thank you. I want to thank Moshe for preparing a fantastic talk and presenting it. It was so enjoyable to listen to you. So thank you so much for presenting that to us.
Okay.
And thank everybody for coming, and tell your friends to come to our next meeting, which will be on a completely different topic.
Hopefully so.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.